Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. Happy Easter. Happy Passover. And happy end to the week and start to the next week. So we've talked about a lot of theories and we've talked about a lot of applications. Today, I wanted to give you my system that I do, and I added some stuff. I went and watched a couple of videos and I added some stuff just to kind of detail it a little bit, because the system that I've done on Sundays, I've done for so long that it's kind of become a habit, right? It's become ingrained, which is the idea with all of this. So I get up in the morning. Well, now I get up in the morning and talk to you, but I get up in the morning and I look at my vision board and I look at my outcomes, like I told you. So my vision board gives me all of my different identities. First of all, it gives me my mission statement. It gives me my primary question, the thing that I'm focused on. And then I go through all of the values that I have, and I did this at Date with Destiny, all of the values that I have and that they're aligned. But that really reminds me of who I am. This is who I am and this is what I'm doing. And then I go through my goals. Now, that's my approach, but you still then got to structure everything that you're doing. And, I still think that Franklin Covey is a great system, but it doesn't matter what system you use. The real issue is, do you use it and does it work for you? So what I do every Sunday is go through a system for organizing my week. And there's really kind of like three main stages. So the first stage is capture. And you can remember this with a couple of C's. The first stage is capture. And number one, we all have to-do lists. And I think one of the things that can happen is you buy a planner and then all it becomes is a long to-do list, right? And right now, this is a great time to get into this habit because our to-do list is pretty short because we're pretty shut down. I mean, this hasn't happened in forever. And so now you've got a time to kind of develop a pattern where you learn a system for doing these things. So number one is capture. Get everything in one spot. And the idea with this should be two things. Number one, so that everything that you're supposed to do or that you think that you're supposed to do goes in one area so that you can organize everything in that area. But number two, so that it gets out of your head and you stop worrying about it. I think when I do this, I have a section on Trello, on that thing that I showed you on my phone, where when something pops up into my head, then I'm like, oh, I need to do that. I put it in this section on Trello. Now, I know that then it's out of my head and I don't have to worry about it. But I also put everything there thinking to myself, I'm not going to do everything that's in that list. It's there so that I can decide what it is that I want. So number one is capture. Then number two is create a plan. So every Sunday I go through and I look at my roles and my goals. And then I create a plan for accomplishing those goals. And I ask myself a series of questions. First, I ask myself, what's my outcome? And by the way, I'm sorry, I'm always dry in the morning. You should start getting into the habit of asking that question before you do anything. What's my outcome? Before you go over and just have a conversation with somebody. What's my outcome? And I'll maybe talk about this tomorrow in a little bit more detail. But when you decide with the end in mind, when you know what your purpose is, that's going to guide you through the process of life much more directed. Direct your own life so that you don't become part of somebody else's life that they direct. If you start out with the end in mind, if you always say, what's my outcome? What is it that I want to accomplish? You're going to cut through a lot of nonsense. I mean, how many times have you gotten into an argument with your spouse and you ended up, or significant other or whatever, and you ended up just continuing the argument because you wanted to win? If you stopped in the middle of that argument and said, what's my outcome? What is it that I really want? It would change the whole situation in terms of that conversation. So the number one question is, what's my outcome? So you look at your roles, you look at your goals, and your roles are the values that you want to have in your life. And then your goals are the specific outcomes that you want for each of those things. So, for me, there's husband, there's father, there's lawyer. And, and by the way, you could make it more exciting than husband, father, and lawyer when you define these things. But we'll talk about that at another time. So, number one, what's my outcome? What is it that I want to accomplish? Number two, why do I want to accomplish it? Remember the why that I talked about yesterday? So what do I want? Why do I want it? Why is it important? And why is it important for me? And why is it important for everybody else? A lot of times the greatest leverage is really the people that we love, and it's not ourselves. Typically for humans, I think, we'll do a lot more for other people than we will for ourselves. So I don't just use why is it important for me? I also use it, why is it important for everybody else? And then what of these actions takes me closer to that outcome? So then you go through that list, and then I do what's called chunking. So I think about what are my roles, what's my outcome, and what's going to get me closer. And then I chunk the various areas into my roles. So I look at this to-do list and look, if all you do is have a to-do list and then try to check things off the to-do list, two things are likely to happen. Number one, you're never getting anything all checked off because there's always too many things to do. Number two, you can check everything off your to-do list and never feel like you've accomplished anything, or never feel like you've gotten closer to your goals, or felt like all you've done is run around like crazy and you don't feel fulfilled. So we want to avoid that. So we always want to focus on where are we going. Okay, so capture, then create a plan. What's my outcome? Why do I want it? What's going to bring me closer? Then I look at all my to-dos and I chunk, because there's going to be a million things. So put them into chunks. So put them into parent chunk. Put them into spouse chunk. Put them into, community chunk. Put them into profession chunk, okay? Chunk them into different sections. That's going to make it a lot easier for you to grasp what you want to do in each thing. And it makes it look like 5 things or 4 things or 6 things rather than 30 things. So that's a lot easier to conceptualize and to grasp. So chunk them into their areas, okay? So now you've got groups of to-dos, and they're groups in each area. All right, now go back to your role and then your outcome in that role. What's my role? What's my outcome? And then prioritize the to-do list based upon what gets you closest to that outcome first. So the things that, if one of your outcomes is to be, great at anything, my personal belief is everything's going to be better with a certain level of health, that you have to take care of your health. So when you look at those to-do things, I would chunk everything that's related to health. So that's going to be exercise, that's going to be food planning, that's going to be making sure you get an appropriate amount of rest, that's going to be meditation, that's going to be, whatever. So chunk all of those things into one thing, and then prioritize what's most important. And then schedule the important things first. Put those down and create that plan for your week where you schedule those important things. I would write on the top, activity without purpose is the drain in life. Running around like a chicken with your head cut off for no reason is going to do nothing but stress you out and make it so that you don't really feel like you got anything done. But if you have purpose in it, then it's going to feel completely different. And if you've actually sat down and looked at your roles and decided, this does bring me closer to my outcomes, now you're going to feel great about doing that activity. So even if that activity is as simple as driving your child to a soccer match, if you've made an actual decision that that's what I want to do right now because my child is at that age and there'll be an age when they're not at that age and I'll miss this like crazy. Now you're not going to feel stressed about it. You're going to feel happy about it. It's the purposeful driven life where you actually decide what it is that you want. You've made a plan for your life. And that way you don't become part of somebody else's plan. So once you start scheduling things, then establish a timeline for the completion of those. And the reason that you do this is because a goal is a dream with a deadline. So schedule the stuff, but schedule a time frame. I'm going to do these within a certain amount of time. And by the way, and I'm so good at this, it drives me crazy. We always estimate that things are going to take way longer than they are. How many of you thought about something, you thought, oh my God, this is going to take forever, and then you sat down and did it, and it took you maybe an hour, right? And the one thing about time, we all talk about leveling the playing field, and we talk about some people have more advantages, some people have more education, some people have more money, some people have more opportunities, but there's one thing that is the same for everyone, and that's time. Everybody has the exact same amount of time. And if you say the phrase, and I've certainly said it, I don't have enough time, that just means that you're not scheduling your time in the ways that you could. Because everybody's got the same amount of time. And there's people who accomplish unbelievably amazing, extraordinary things in the same number of hours in the day as you do. So what's the difference? Well, that's really kind of the third thing. So number one, schedule the plan, create the plan. Number two, look at it in real time. And then number three, do leverage. So what do I mean by that? So by going through this process, by the way, notice that you've chunked all the to-do things into big sections, which has made it easier to grasp. And then you've gotten rid of the to-do things that are irrelevant, if you've noticed. You've prioritized and scheduled the things that are priorities. So you've eliminated the things that are not priorities. So you've gotten that nonsense out of your life. You've gotten the wastes of time out of your life. Well, then the next thing to do as you start to grow your plan is to leverage things out. And what I mean by that is, as life goes on, you can get a team to help you do things so that you have more time to do the things that you should be doing. So, I mean, if your goals in life are financial, to accomplish a certain level of finances or to become a certain level professionally or that type of thing, there comes a point where, you shouldn't be cleaning your own house. There comes a point where you shouldn't be even preparing your own food. Those things are things that unless you love doing those things, I mean, if it's something that gives you growth and it makes you, that's how you relax or whatever, but there comes a point where you shouldn't be doing that stuff because it's time that you should be spending in other areas. Any way that you can leverage out your time so that you can develop a group of people that you work with that support you and you support them so that you're spending the most time on the things that are most important. That's leverage. And that can be tiny things and that can be larger things. So that's the final stage to this whole step. So capture, create a plan, ask yourself what you want, ask yourself why you want it, ask yourself what things get closer, go back to would get you closer, chunk your to-do list, prioritize those things. Newell had a great approach back in the 80s and 90s. Newell became a company that would go through and they would buy other companies and they would multiply tremendously their outcomes. And what they did, Newell's a company that was based in Freeport, Illinois for a long period of time. They were a Fortune 500 company. And what they did is they figured out that if they bought a really high-end company that had a great product, they learned that about 80% of the profits from that company came from about 20% of the effort. and 20% of the profits came from the remaining 80% of the effort. And what they did is they got rid of that 80% effort, and so you ended up multiplying your output by 4 because you were only working 20% as much and you still had 80% of the output that you had. So the company multiplied its profits by 4. The same can be said of us. Leverage your time and focus on the things that you're supposed to do, and then you got lots more time to do the things that, are busy and are those things. We all need to spend time with our families. We all need to spend time with doing stuff that isn't as high a priority for us. But do the things that are important first, and this is a great way to do that. Capture the stuff, create a plan, chunk the things up, ask yourself what's most important, ask yourself why, schedule those things, make sure that your activities have purpose, and before you do anything, so like today, if you're doing some stuff with your family, before you start getting into the habit of before you're doing anything, ask yourself, what's my outcome? What is my outcome of this? If you're going over to visit a friend, ask yourself, what's my outcome of this conversation? If you start with the end in mind and start getting into that habit, and you'll develop that habit very quickly, life becomes significantly less stressful because it's a directed life. You're designing your own life as opposed to becoming part of somebody else's design. Hey, have a great day. Have a great day, everybody. I will say hi to everyone when I respond. I've noticed that if I start saying hi while I'm talking, it kind of interrupts my thought process and it messes me up a little bit. So I'm going to do it in terms of responding actually on Facebook. So have a great Easter. Have a great Sunday. Hope Passover went great. And thanks again for watching. See you guys tomorrow.